I think it really, it really depends upon the client and where they are in the life cycle from a procurement standpoint. If you take newer clients, the challenge they face is just getting to know the country, and particularly where to go search for companies that are potential sourcing targets. The actual diligence, how do they figure out whether this company, the management structure, whether the company is healthy before they move forward with a contract. So it's typically more basic identification of opportunity, qualification of opportunity. The more advanced companies, what they're facing is that they've identified a number of opportunities, but many of and this is particularly relevant with the industrial products and automotive companies, don't have the engineering support on the ground here in China to help. Procurement is we look at is a much broader element. It's not just the buying of parts, but here in China, as part of procurement, you have to develop your suppliers. The Japanese, if you take a look at the auto industry, the Japanese have done an excellent job of building engineering talent in the country and taking this talent, working hand in hand with the suppliers so that they can develop the suppliers to their characteristics and needs. And so many multinationals just face the task of bringing engineering people up to speed so that they can evolve purchasing into more of a supplier relationship function versus just a cost play here in China. Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing at clients is where they've come in initially as a pure cost play, that's starting to, that advantage is starting to end. And, the clients now are rethinking their strategies. It's not just a cost play on a per piece basis, but because of what's happening in China, the rising costs of fuel, of commodity, if you take a look at food commodities, increased 23% in the month of February this year. But the rising inflation, rising costs of commodities and fuel, they're looking at other opportunities now, looking at things more from a Pan-Asian basis. So you now have countries like Vietnam that are becoming part of the equation. Now, Vietnam doesn't have the infrastructure that China has, but Vietnam does have and does have certain advantages in specific categories, like textiles, like castings. So Vietnam is becoming attractive, and people are looking outside of China. The other thing that's happening is most of the true price increase have been in the eastern cities in China. So where you had easy picking earlier on, and you could come to Shanghai and look, 30 kilometers outside of Shanghai and find good suppliers. Now with cost increase, what procurement departments are doing is they're looking further west. They're looking in Wuhan. They're looking outside of Chongqing, and really into the central parts of China. Also, there's a movement now up to the northern parts of China where you had a lot of the old Rust Belt and industrial belt that they're looking up there, where the cost of living is much further below some of the initial urban areas that these companies have come in for sourcing. So relocation within China, relocation outside of China are some of what we're seeing now, and it's particularly around the early entrants who came into some of the urban areas and are now faced with suppliers that may not be as competitive as they once were. Each country has certain advantages. India's advantage is the population. First of all, it has more college graduates every year than any other nation, and secondly, they're English speaking. They have really branded themselves as an outsourcing market, particularly for services, and they do a very good job. So you have a movement of Western functions, outsourced IT functions, call centers, all going to China, all going to India, building the Indian middle class. In terms of procurement and sourcing and hard industry development, India has disadvantages that China doesn't have. Number one, it's almost too democratic and bureaucratic. It takes a long time to get things done and to get things through an approval level. There are advantages to a more autocratic government. Things happen very quickly. All you have to do is, if you go to Beijing and you look what's happening to the Olympics, in the last 3 years they've built what's going to be the world's fourth largest airport, and within an 18-month period they built a high-speed train from the airport downtown. Now, I don't know many other countries that could have, cut through the red tape, the environmental issues, everything else to do that. So an autocratic government is an advantage when you need things to happen and when you have national campaigns. And secondly, the infrastructure here is very good. If you've ever traveled in central China in a car, there are some, the highway systems in parts of central China where not many Westerners go is fairly developed. You'll drive from Wuhan to Shriyan in, a 5-hour drive, and you'll be on the road and see giant, they've built giant rest areas, with service stations, restaurants. Now, no one's using them now, and they're only half open, but they built the infrastructure so that 20 years from now, when people are traveling the highway, they have an option to stop at these things. I mean, that's just one example of China's great ability to rapidly develop infrastructure. And I think what will happen here in China is, as companies start moving west to capture lower cost, the Chinese government will put programs in place to develop the road network and the train systems to be more reliable, so that goods can be transferred from central and western China to the coastal regions for export and for domestic consumption. HR here in China is very challenging. It revolves around people development and people retention. Many companies have taken the strategy. They want to. They're moving forward with localization as quickly as they can, but there's some practical limitations. What you have is a new generation of very well-educated, aggressive domestic Chinese who want to get ahead. They see this is a golden opportunity because of the expansion, and the smarter individuals don't want to wait necessarily for a full development. They want to move ahead quickly. So you have people in the ages between 30 and 35 that may have 8 to 10 years experience, being offered CFO jobs at large companies and IPOs. It's this rapid need for executive management that you really still don't have the middle management filled out that you need to sustain yourself for the long term. So I believe that the biggest challenge that companies face, whether it's a domestic Chinese company or multinational, is first of all, how do I develop the talent to operate in a global economy? And then secondly, how do I take the key talent and retain it? New long-term incentive programs. Long-term incentive is not really a concept that's been embedded in companies because of the old state regime, it was employment for life. Now you have to incent people to stay. Talent development, talent retention are two critical issues here. There are no perfect answers. It's going to be, I think, for the next 5 to 10 years, something that companies are going to have to put special programs in place in order to really maintain and keep that top talent.